Hi, I'm Tom Clark, and this is Verse by Verse. If we were to list the foods we each really like, our lists would be different, maybe a lot different. Even the same dish, if prepared differently, can cater to different tastes, like a bowl of chili, which can go from mild and tasty all the way to so spicy it seems to have molten lava as one of the ingredients. Many people are aware that the Old Testament contains instructions for what we're allowed to eat, what meats people are allowed to eat and which they aren't. Prohibited meats include some very common and popular meats like pork or shellfish or things like catfish. And to this day, practicing Jews avoid these meats because of the biblical instructions. But when we come to the New Testament, many believe those Old Testament regulations have been removed and we're now free to eat whatever we wish. One of the New Testament passages used to prove this approach is found in Acts chapter 10. In Acts 10, Peter was given a vision by God of a great sheet being lowered to the ground, and it contained all kinds of animals, birds, and creeping things. And in verse 13, Peter was told, "Rise, kill, and eat." But Peter objected because he had never eaten anything unclean, which is biblical language for those prohibited meats. But he's told by God, what God has cleansed, you must not call common or unclean. That sounds pretty conclusive, that God has now made all animals clean or acceptable for human consumption. So, whether you enjoy a good pork chop, popcorn shrimp, oyster stew, or a good lobster tail, that's now just fine, and you can indulge to your heart's content. Or is it? Is that what it means? Is that the lesson God was teaching Peter? The first few verses of this same chapter talk about a Roman soldier named Cornelius, whom God was calling. Trouble is, the man was a Gentile, meaning he was not a Jew. And at that time, the animosity between the Jewish and Gentile peoples was so intense that many early Christian converts, almost all of whom came from Judaism, could not imagine Gentiles being called into the faith. That was about to change, and Peter's vision was part of the process. After that vision, as Peter sat thinking about it, he was informed 3 men were seeking him. And he went out to meet 3 servants of Cornelius, inviting Peter to come to his home and teach them of the faith. Over the next couple of days, Peter learned this Gentile Roman soldier was very sincere, very devout, and clearly being called by God to the faith. Cornelius had even been given a vision where he was told to seek Peter. But what to do? The man was a Gentile. Could a Gentile also become a Christian? Could Peter possibly baptize a Gentile man? The key to understanding that question and the vision is found in verse 28. Peter told the group, "You know how unlawful it is for a Jewish man to keep company with or go to one of another nation. But God has shown me that I should call no man common or unclean." That's what the vision meant. God was not telling Peter he could now eat crab or crayfish or ham. He was telling Peter that he, God, would call men and women of all nations, all ethnic backgrounds, all cultures, to the faith, and they must all be accepted as faithful Christians. That's why Peter said a few verses later, "In truth I perceive that God shows no partiality, but in every nation whoever fears him and works righteousness is accepted by him." In God's great design, some animals were designed for food for human beings and some were not. That hasn't changed. What has changed was Peter's understanding and the early church's understanding that salvation would be open to all people equally. That should be of great comfort to many who hear this podcast. Even if we do know our ancestry, most of us are partially or perhaps entirely Gentile in origin, but that doesn't mean a thing before our Creator. If He called us to the faith, we all have equal standing before Him. Acts 10 does not give us permission to add unclean meats to our diet, but it does give us hope and comfort knowing that our Father loves all men equally. Our skin color, our ethnic backgrounds don't mean a thing before Him. What matters most is that He has called us to Himself and that we strive diligently to keep the faith. If you would like to learn more about clean and unclean meats, see the links in the show notes below.
Verse by Verse is a Life, Hope, and Truth podcast. Check out the show notes to find more free content, like videos, articles, and booklets in our Learning Center.